Okay, so I'm speaking to Akshay Chaturvedi today. He is the founder of Leverage EDU. He also made it to the Forbes 2020 list for Asia as well as India, and he has also been a part of the Prime Minister's Champions of Change. So he started a company called Leverage EDU, which is an AI-enabled marketplace for students as well as professionals to connect to mentors and get better access to higher education. And I personally feel very passionately about education and education technology because of its potential to break barriers and make it more inclusive and accessible. So I'm really excited about this chat, and I'm just gonna add in Akshay here.
Hear me now?
Yeah, I can hear you now.
Awesome, awesome.
Yeah. Thank you for joining us, Akshay.
No, thank you so much for having me.
Good to be speaking to
This
you
this
now.
this seems to be fun.
Yes, I hope so. And I'm very sure it's going to be fun. I've read so much about you, and I'm so excited to actually speak to you in person. And yeah. So, Akshay, to begin
No,
with,
thank you,
could you
Trishna.
just tell everyone what leverage to begin with, could you give us an introduction about what Leverage EDU is, who are your target customers, and what services do you exactly
Sure,
provide?
sure. So we are in essentially a university admissions business, which helps students with first making the choice. What higher education should they pursue? What career should they essentially be moving towards when they're very early in the journey? Then we help them meet mentors from around the world who will essentially help them take this journey forward. These are generally mentors who have been in their shoes previously. If I'm from a Kanpur, I get matched to somebody who's also from a Kanpur with a similar profile, say EPL to EPL, Sufi to Sufi. As a mentee, I'm working with somebody I really aspire to be like, and as a mentor, I'm working with somebody I feel like, hey, you know what, like I was like this person 5 years back in the day, so I really want to help this person. It's a lot of relatability which kicks in. And post that, this person essentially works with this mentor and somebody who's called a head coach in our system, who's actually seen the admissions process from the last 5, 10, 15 years, who's an expert in this area, and then get on to essentially getting an admit at one of their dream universities to essentially helping them with everything that happens following that. If it's loan, accommodation options, all of those pieces. If it's abroad, it includes visa and all of those other processes that are important as you move abroad as well. So that's pretty much the core of what we do, the university admissions business. And then we have other ancillary pieces to it. We have a platform called Leverage Live, which is a live learning classes platform for students who want to pursue multiple programs like IELTS, TOEFL, SAT, GRE, GMAT, and also a marketplace that offers online courses from universities from around the world, so you can kind of pick up a small 30-day course and upgrade your skills. We have Unique Connect, which is an online education fair platform, which is essentially a great like replicates an offline fair. You can go in, you can meet universities, you can get on the spot offers, you can get scholarships. And right now we are in the process of we are working hard towards launching career guidance app for school kids starting grade. Some lag. I hope I was audible.
Yeah, the last bit wasn't so audible. I think that's the problem with the internet connection.
Sure, let me just repeat it. I said that the last piece is that we are launching a career guidance app now in the next 1.5, 2 months, which will help do the same thing for school students as well, starting grade 7, 8, 9, 10, which will help them understand what career is right for them and also map them to a mentor for personalized guidance. So again, the larger vision and mission is to democratize access to the right quality of education and make sure that
Yeah,
everybody is able to kind of successfully be able to get to their dreams.
yeah, that's amazing. So, how did you think of starting Leverage EDU, and what was the inspiration behind it?
Sure. So pretty much started from a say in my life to have mentors who have right path, told me what to do, told me how to get from point A to point B. And I realized that I was able to get to those mentors probably because I was an extrovert. I was reaching out to 100 people and not being affected if 95 people tell me to get lost. But I realized that, hey, you know what, like I could essentially get a great launch into my career just because I had the right people guiding me, right people backing me, what if I can essentially exponentially solve this problem and get access to mentors, the right mentors, personalized map mentors for millions of people. And because I truly believe that with the right mentorship, the life can completely change. And when a life is transformed in Middle India, the entire family's life is transformed. You see families leveling up in itself, and yeah, that pretty much hits home personally, and that's what we've tried to do. When we started out the mentor marketplace, when it was just leverage and not leverage edu, we started with multiple categories, focused on school students, focused on university students, focused on students who are looking for their first job, and we saw maximum number of people essentially looking for our services, focused on university admissions. So that's where we essentially built out a brand in 3 years, and over time we are essentially now going covering the before and after of the university admission journey as well, trying to help people who are in school, trying to help people who essentially need our services to decide what's the right skill to pick, to decide what's the right job to pick post getting a university degree as well. So of course, been quite a journey, but again, very very early days.
Yeah, well, that's so amazing because I feel like there's such a lack of like having a mentor in India, and that concept is still so unexplored. And it can really, like, someone who really has that kind of experience can really add to you from their own experience, and just,
Absolutely,
you don't have to repeat the same mistakes. So
absolutely.
yeah. So, actually, coming to your entrepreneurial journey, you did an MBA from ISB in entrepreneurship, and you did your BCom honors for your undergraduation, and now you're running essentially like a hardcore tech company. I mean, it's all
Hmm.
AI enabled and it's completely online. So, how does someone who's not coming from a tech background
Hmm.
start a tech company? Like, what would your advice be to someone who's not had that, who's not an engineer and wants to
Hmm.
sort of get into the space?
Okay, so let me kind of break it in two parts. One piece is about I think the overemphasis of tech is kind of overrated here. The idea is to bring in tech wherever you want to solve a problem. So in fact, even now when we speak to when we're sitting in a boardroom or when we're essentially speaking to media, we always talk about how every single piece of tech that we've built till now, and we have built a lot of tech. Every single piece of tech that we've built till now aligns to a particular business metric. It's either focused on making the student experience much better, much more comprehensive on the platform. It's either focused on ensuring that there are a lot of free tools for the user to explore if they don't want to enroll with us as a paid student. It's focused on either distributing access to a large set of people for the students. So essentially, any and every piece is focused on solving a business problem, and hence that's the second point as well. So I think that before looking at how tech can essentially come in and do things, you have to figure out is there a business problem that you want to solve? Firstly, is there a problem that you kind of really fall in love with, are very passionate about? It's a hard, lonely journey, of course. Are you ready to kind of slog it out? And why do you want to torture yourself and give yourself the pain if you're not really passionate about it? And that's where the impact part kicks in. If this really makes you very, very excited, that's when you will essentially jump into it. And then you essentially figure out, hey, is there a business around it? And then you validate it. And if you do see a business around it, then that's when you essentially start making the business more efficient from a technology perspective. In my case, of course, knew that I wanted to be an entrepreneur very early on. Would have started selling glaze papers in grade 3 and starting my own books club and all when I was in grade 4 or 5. But coming to the tech piece, of course, in 2016, when I was working with a firm called babajob.com, this is just after kind of finishing my MBA and year after that, I self-learned a bit of coding for a period of 6 to 8 months. So, of course, not that I can code today, but I have some rough idea on how much time it takes to complete a task. And that probably
Yeah.
helps sometimes when I'm having chats with Aman, who leads tech for us now.
Okay. But that's possible. Like someone who wants to enter into this space, and if they have a concrete business problem to solve, they can navigate through this without being from a tech background.
Correct. And of course, you can, one part is that you don't need to, you can always find the right partners for yourself to, who align with the vision, who believe that this can be a big problem to solve as well. And second is, of course, you need to have some working knowledge of how tech operates, how much time it takes to essentially hack something, so on and so forth. And I think that's pretty useful. In fact,
Yeah.
I was reading this about one of these entrepreneur friends who runs Oyo, Ritesh. Ritesh, when he went
Hmm.
to China, I was reading about this couple of. He actually learned Mandarin and he used to essentially write Mandarin as well to speak with all the employees of Oyo in China. And if you can learn Mandarin again, like coding is a small thing. At the end of the day, you would do anything and everything that you can to make your business successful.
Yeah. So, coming back to your MBA, so a lot of
Hmm.
people who end up watching these lives are probably people who've had a few years of work ex and are considering like an MBA. So, what do you recommend to someone who, like, particularly is looking to start a business in India? Would you, recommend them to go for an MBA abroad versus an MBA in India? Because, I mean, one of the key like ideas behind an MBA is also networking. And if you want to
Hmm.
start a business in India, I believe it would be better to have like a network in India because you can reach out
Hmm.
to them for problems that you have here. So, what is your opinion on that?
So again, I think it depends. I'll again break it into two pieces. First one is, do you need an MBA or not? It's not necessary for sure.
Yeah.
Does having it help? Maybe. It helped in my case. Again, it depends on the problem that you're trying to solve. What higher education probably does is it's a bundled degree, right? It comes with multiple things. Networking is one piece of it that you spoke about. It adds a credential to you, which is very, very valuable, which will essentially tag you along. Like we connected because we had both worked for the same company at some point of time, right? And
Yeah.
immediately when I heard that, I was like, wow, okay, there's somebody who has worked at EY as well. And that develops a connect right away. So I think the credential part is there, the networking part is there, the overall grooming part is there. But I think sometimes you underestimate the academic part as well. My biggest learning from my MBA was that I could break a problem into multiple pieces, structure it, and structure my own thoughts when I essentially am trying to hack something which is meaningful. Without that foundation, without that structure, it would have been very difficult for me to essentially run my business on a day-to-day basis today. So I really value the academic piece that comes in with an MBA or comes in with any master's degree as well. Second part is again, do you necessarily need to do an MBA only, or could you essentially do some other course which relates more to what you want to do? If I want to start, say, a wine business, can I just go out and study, do a master's in wine, specialization in food tech or something? Can I go out and do a luxury fashion management? Do I want to do something in sports? Can I go out and do a sports management, sports nutrition? So there I'm now kind of learning how to break sports problems, or I'm trying to break how to essentially break a supply chain problem when I'm looking to get into fashion. Because fashion is not just about those ramp shows. It's also about how supply chain works, how the yard works, how how the textile mill workers go about their process, how much time does it take. Same thing for sports. Do I want to network with the ESPN guys? Do I want to network with the BBC guys? Do I want to network with the differentiate bodies? So I always believe that it's better to make a global network. And when you essentially go to a global school today, one out of every six people, as you know, are Indian. You always will find enough Indians who are the best of the crop there as well. So there is no one versus other. It again depends on what you want to do at that particular point of time. There are people who don't need an MBA and who have built out beautiful businesses. We have enough examples of that. We don't
Yeah.
essentially need to even do undergrad for that. But again, for somebody who's looking to get a great leg up, it definitely reduces time. In my case, my first round of fundraising came in from a bunch of people who had gone to ISB. So about four alums across eight classes, 2005, 2009, 2010, and three professors who had taught me. And these professors from all around the world, because ISB is
Wow.
a visiting professor model. And that continues to help me a lot because I was in the education business, and the fact that I had professors guiding me and kind of telling me what's the latest research that will really help us be more on the edge, be competitive against brick and mortar competitors who we were kind of solving this problem against. I think that really added a lot of value in my journey and would have definitely accelerated our pace by 1 to 1.5 years.
Yeah. Okay.
I,
And
I,
also,
but I'm in the education business, so I have a bias. I would always recommend education.
yeah. And also, so you've had a very rich experience. So, like, in a very short span of time, you've worked at Snapdeal and KPMG and Ernst and Young and, then Baba Jobs. So, you were, you worked across all these companies, and then you decided to start your own business. So how did you sort of make that transition from having a 9 to 5 job to having your own business? And especially, because at the end of the day, it's a very practical decision as well, especially for someone who does not have the backing of, a family business or like
Hmm.
accumulated savings. So how does one make that transition? When is the right time, as per your opinion, to make that transition?
Interesting. Uh, I'll again break this answer also into three pieces. First piece is did not do such quick transitions. मैं 30 साल का हूँ त्रिशला मतलब काफी टाइम बिताया है इन सब कंपनीज के अंदर. I am not as young now as I would have wanted to be. So again, I've spent about 2.5 3 years at EY. It could also, in fact, come across as this was a very distracted guy who couldn't stay at one place for a very long period of time. That's how I would have looked at it if I was hiring myself. But anyway, so again, I think the second piece of it is that I was never in a 9 to 5 job. I think you have worked at EY as well. And I joined EY, like my first job was at KPMG, where I was for about 6 to 7 months, and then I joined EY, and I worked there for about close to 3 years. Uh, I think at most of these larger, in fact, this is more particular to Big Four. You start your day at about 9 to 10 a.m. and then you kind of end it next day at 2 a.m., 3 a.m., 4 a.m. So 9 to 5 culture तो कभी देखा ही नहीं मतलब समझ में नहीं आया and I can essentially attribute to my manager of that time. But I think that slog came through from there, and from then onward, my aspiration always was to I was always doing something on the side. I was trying to either support a business, start up in some small way. I tried to start something in the export business. We had a website called India Indulge in 2012 where I wanted to leverage onto my ISEC network and start selling clothes from NGO called Pardada Pardadi Educational Society, which was there in Himachal Pradesh, I believe. And we used to sell it to people in Europe. And then we realized that this company came called India Roots, run by Rahul Narvekar, who's now a very good friend. And they kind of disrupted our business. So I was doing a bunch of things on the side. The aspiration was to get onto the internet economy. I remember interviewing with Jabong and Snapdeal in 2012-13 for a product manager role. And they asked me to fuck off. They told me that boss, अगर engineer नहीं हो तो product manager बनने का sense ही नहीं बनता. Of course, now it's changed. Now we have a product manager in our team who is not an engineer and who come from very varied backgrounds and they add so much value. But back then, product manager was as simple as kind of communicating to engineers and just ensuring the vision is replicated in the right way in the product. So from there to essentially my larger reason to do an MBA was I wanted to break into the internet economy and then work with a bunch of these internet players. Was lucky enough to join Snapdeal. That is also a different story. I had written a cold email to Kunal Behel and he replied like within 2 minutes. I was trying to sponsor my tickets to the US when I was going for this fellowship. And that's how when I was kind of finishing that fellowship, it made sense to come back to Snapdeal and learn how to grow and build a business which was in its finest phase in 2015. And the third piece to your question was about accumulated savings. So वो तो फंडा मतलब I think मेरे साथ भी था. I very simple calculation that I had made was when I was about to start leverage. I told my girlfriend of that time, now my wife, that मेरे पास ये 6 महीने के पैसे हैं जो मैंने इकट्ठे किए हैं. अगर इसमें बिजनेस चल गया तो ठीक है, नहीं चला तो मैं दोबारा नौकरी पकड़ लूंगा. I'll ensure that we get married. And thankfully, we made money in those first 6 months and did not have to look back and did get married 2 years back. But yeah, of course, everybody who starts from zilch has to kind of figure out where will the first cash come from, where will the first customers come from, where would the first funders be, and of course, it was a journey with all its ups and downs. But in hindsight, it teaches you so much, and you won't want to do it any other way.
Yeah, that's amazing. So, picking up from what you told me about the email you sent to Kunal Bell, can you elaborate more on that and also tell me what did that lead to, and also about your experience at Drapers? Is that how you pronounce it? I'm not sure.
Correct,
Tim
correct,
Draper. Yeah.
correct. No, so little bit of a backstory in 2012-13 when I was trying to break into the internet economy. I was always in a habit of I follow this policy in my life called the LIC insurance agent policy. So there are two ways to kind of hustle on in life. One is you act like a pretty girl or pretty boy and sit in a corner and make sure that you make everybody envious in the room and people come to you. The other strategy is the LIC insurance strategy that like go all out, like go and not spam everybody, but try and engage as much as you can in a polite and respectful way, and but just go all out and 70 लोग गाली देंगे तो 30 लोग तो मतलब बोलेंगे कि ठीक है, they will appreciate your reaching out to them, and 5 will say yes, and essentially you will have 2 or 3 people reach out to you and become your champions. So I think that's a strategy I followed from very early on in my life. And when I was trying to break into the internet economy very early on, it had just started to kind of become mainstream in India 2011-12. I wrote an email to this female called Heidi Roizen, who's a very senior partner at a VC firm in Silicon Valley. And I had no idea back then that about her stature, but I had reached out to her because I could see that she had worked at Apple, she had worked at Microsoft for a short duration, she had seen multiple businesses, and I said so and so, and like would love to essentially speak to you. And she said that, hey, thanks for reaching out, but I don't have the time. And then I pestered, and then finally, like I think she got tired of me, and she said, there's a nice talk where she talks about it. I'll share the link with you after this. And she spoke about this finally in 2016. She said, I was so pestered by this guy, but he was so respectful and polite. So I still thought that I will tell him that, okay, you can email me once for like 5 minutes every 15th. And she thought that I will forget. But I actually remembered and put it on my calendar, and I used to email her every single month. And that started a relationship. So I think, so about 2.5 years later, when I was still at ISB, and I realized that Heidi had a case on her. It was a Harvard Business School case study on her that we essentially went through in business school. And I was like, okay, wow, I had no idea, Heidi, that you had a case study on yourself. And that's when she said that, hey, you know what, you've been speaking about Silicon Valley for years. There's this new fellowship which has come out. Tim Draper, she used to work at DFJ Ventures, so Draper, Fisher, Jurvetson. They've been investors in Tesla, Skype, SpaceX, which is going to see a launch very soon,
Yeah, yeah.
Hotmail, Baidu, all of these companies. So she said, hey, why don't you essentially apply to this fellowship and I'll put in a word. And that's what happened. So I had a scholarship to kind of help me go through the fellowship. I was still figuring out my accommodation, my flying and everything else, like every middle class hustler would. And that's when my accommodation came in from TIE. TIE is this, again, you would know, entrepreneurial body which helps, which fosters entrepreneurship in their words. And then I was figuring out my flight tickets, and I wrote into Kunal, said कि ऐसे ऐसे है, मतलब कुणाल आप बताओ, आप help करोगे, मैं मतलब बाद में वापस आके इंडिया की, I want to make India proud and all of that. And he reverted and he marked his HR, and that's how it started. It led to me going to Draper, and I had a great experience there for about 4 months. That's where Leverage essentially was incubated in some way. And yeah, I think that pretty much was the foundation of what we're doing today. And today we also, Draper University folks have now launched an online program. We have started distributing that in India. So it's become a
Okay.
full circle.
Okay. Okay. I think that there needs to be an entire article on how you went about this and how you got there, and just like it should be captioned the go-getter or something. It's just so like inspiring and so fun to hear.
Very, very kind of you, very kind of you. I've just been lucky. I've been at the right place at the right point of time. That's all I've been trying for in the last decade or even before that as a kid.
That's amazing. So, yeah. So, coming to your company, was there like a
Hmm.
pilot phase before you really full-fledgedly went into this, and like how did you validate this idea, and before really
Hmm.
like giving all of it to this idea?
Sure. Sure. So we did two pilots. The larger pilot I told you was, of course, till my savings run out. But more seriously speaking, two pilots. One was focused on the career guidance category. So we went to 3 schools, and we saw if we used to have an app back in the day. Funny, we don't have an app today. We are launching one again now, and we saw if students were really kind of enjoying it, and we had a lot of success in that. Three Delhi specific schools, and then. I had also started to kind of help because I was an ISB alum. I had started to kind of help people who wanted to get to ISB, and that's how the business kind of started on the university admissions piece. And then more people started to reach out. I had a full 100% success rate on every student who I had mentored was able to make through their dream university. And then we kind of started getting in more guys who were from the industry, started getting in more people who were alumni, and we realized that it's a space where how do I put it? it's a space where many people kind of try to stay away from the space because they believe that it will take a long time to build a business here. It's easier to build technology-driven modes in businesses which give you tech-driven efficiencies very fast, like a logistics business or an entertainment business or something like Instagram or TikTok, where you can
Yeah.
kind of get to virality much faster and have millions of users. And then again, have the larger problem of monetizing these, which is what a Kevin at Instagram face and a Joanne at WhatsApp face, and that's how these got acquired by Facebook. And
Yeah.
so you have all of these problems of monetization that kick in later. And the other piece is, do I want to focus on a limited set of users, add a lot of value in their lives, enrich their lives completely, make sure that they kind of swear by my product, but make a larger amount and not essentially depend on advertising as a revenue. So the latter piece is something that kind of really excited me from a thesis perspective, and that's what we focused on. And as we essentially move further and further on, in the beginning, we were very sure that we wanted to, in the university admissions piece, that we wanted to build a lot of tech products for universities to get access to the right talent in the South Asian geography. We really wanted to do all courses across all countries, but we realized that that will be a very foolhardy way of kind of starting the business. So in the first, I think 6 months, we only focused on the MBA. Seventh month onward, we started focusing on STEM degrees in the US, then on data science degrees, because these are all again more easier programs to kind of handle, and you can get more mentors easily. It was easy to kind of call 10 friends from Ivy Leagues and tell them that, hey, can you be mentors on the platform, and then do the beg borrow steal, to essentially then getting mentors from for different courses from around the world. And over time, I think we now do multiple products for the universities as well as for the students, where we have a complete product suite. We help students of all types, be it somebody who is from Vizag or Amravati, or somebody who's in a Bombay or a Delhi at Nariman Point or a South Delhi. And I think we have built out a brand over time, about as a company which focuses on what's the right career for you, and they will not. It's not a company which will just push you into doing a data degree or doing a random MBA, but will really tell you that, hey, is culinary arts right for you? Why don't you go and become a chef? Is sports nutrition really right for you? Why don't you go out and do this program in partnership with Chelsea at this university called St. Mary's in London, and directly get a job at Chelsea to begin your career? Like if I've been a huge football fan myself. If I knew that I could go out and do a undergrad degree which is sponsored by Chelsea, I would have jumped at it. Like I would have preferred to start my career at Chelsea than at KPM Jorima. So again, I think it's also a function of a lot of people. There's an information arbitrage, and technology modes are very difficult to build in this space, and which I believe is why the business is also fun, because you're impacting such a wide variety of people from all across, and it's a business that is not going to be easy to compete against, as you every single day of execution is in some sense a moat towards the future.
Yeah.
I answered it more than I should have, but yeah.
No, no,
Thank you
no.
for answering. Thank you for
Yeah.
asking this question.
So just thank you for answering it. I'm like, I really love all your answers, and they're very, very informative. So I'm very happy about that. So you don't have to
Thank
cut
you.
them short at all. So yeah, so talking about mentoring, so the main idea behind Leverage Edu is mentoring. But I
Correct.
feel like in India, mentoring hasn't really evolved to that point. So how do you sort of
That's right.
spread awareness for what you're offering, your product? Because there's still this mentality about just be good at academics and probably like do one of these CA and medical. I mean, it is changing, but
Hmm.
like
No, bang
changing
on.
more so in urban like Bombay and like Delhi. But otherwise, it's still like people don't really look at these other aspects like mentoring and stuff other than just academics. So how are you
Sure.
spreading awareness about that?
Sure. So, beautifully, you kind of summarized my answer in your question. And so, when we started out Leverage, we were just a mentorship marketplace where people would come in randomly for mentorship advice. And it was very difficult to also essentially have somebody pay for mentorship slash career advice, because the larger belief is that,
Yeah.
hey, you know what, like I'll just message somebody on LinkedIn and they will respond. And
Yeah,
that's very tough to
exactly.
debate against, because it is true. And so what we realized as we move further is that we'll have mentorship. We'll build the company on the legs of mentorship, but we'll have it as a key part of the overall process. We won't essentially use it to build awareness, to kind of come in and be on our platform. And the tangibility, at least today and for the foreseeable 5 to 7 years, I'm saying a very bold statement, will still be about what do we really want to do with this mentorship. And hence we said that, and hence the pivot happened to say it's a university admissions business. You
Yeah.
can get to a computer science degree at Stanford. You can get to a sports degree at St. Mary's. You can get to a food tech degree at Strathclyde in Scotland, and you can do a fashion management at this beautiful institute in Germany, or automobile engineering in Germany. But how we will differentiate is by way of not giving you access to a random consultant down the street, but having you speak to mentors who have kind of been in your shoes and who have kind of made out a career for themselves and are working in these XYZ companies, so that you really feel inspired in your journey. So mentorship in itself, we realize that it can't be, I don't want to use the word sold, but it can't be essentially used as a main offering and used as a main value prop. It can definitely
Yeah.
be used as a differentiator in terms of how you will go about a different process. So we have people on the platform who want to do actuarial science, and we give them an actuary mentor who's working in an insurance company in London right now. We have people who want to do who want to become great doctors and do a like a specialization in surgery. And we have doctors from say a US or a Germany or a Australia who are kind of helping these guys. So same thing for CA, CPA, ACWA, all of those things. And I think that is what has helped us. Will it change, and will we start start using mentorship as a main value prop in the future? We'll get to know in 2 to 3 months when we launch this product in schools, and we'll see how schools pick it up as B2B entities. But B2C, we saw it a little bit difficult to kind of build onto that. And I think that's what has been proved out by the larger edtech landscape. Parents will essentially be excited about something that adds value in the everyday of their child's routine, not necessarily something which is way beyond the extracurriculars out there. So of course, one is the impact piece and second is the business piece, and you have to ensure that both of them have a parallel, perpendicular yardstick, and both of them are crisscrossing each other as we build a business.
Yeah, yeah. So also, actually, one of the things that I really feel one of the things that I read and I felt very good about reading it was how you're trying to democratize this whole space. Because in a Bombay or or like say in a Delhi or even in smaller cities, there's there's a category of people who have access to the best counselors. So let's say even from Kanpur, someone would travel to Bombay, get the best counselor. But that's a very very small percentage of the
That's right.
population. But for more, and then there's a mid-range who are aware of counselors, and they probably approach someone in their own cities. But are you at all considering the market that probably does not even have a stable internet connection? But they are
Correct.
diligent. They're probably going to government schools, but they are brilliant at what they do. But they don't have that kind of exposure. So are they also part of your target market? Considering at the end of the day it's a business. So how do you sort of try to include them and make this more inclusive?
Sure. So I think, Trishula, the first piece is that thanks to Mukesh Ambani and thanks to Jio, India has largely become very digital today. In fact, we have people who come onto a platform and are already have all the information that they can get from the platform on free. And then when they essentially make the first call, they're already armed with multiple 10 to 12 questions. And we see these calls coming in from tier 5, tier 6 cities. So I think that has really changed a lot in the post-Jio world. People have access to, we have 1 million plus people who come onto a platform every single month. And we have a lot of free tools for them in terms of what destinations they want to explore, what tests they want to take, a lot of videos for them to essentially go about, a lot of FAQs. Where should they take a loan from? How should they go about their cost of living? Where should they essentially figure out what different courses or universities will be right for them with our AI calculator and so on and so forth. So I think today we are still able to focus on everybody who has a mobile in their hand. And the aspiration, of course, is to reach the last mile. The vision is there, but not being able to hack it today, very honestly. Yet today we are still able to kind of get to whoever has a mobile in their hand. That's the first piece. Second piece is about that democratizing access piece that you spoke about. So what we do is we build in price sensitivity to how we go about our different services. So for example, somebody where the mentor is going to be very expensive for us. For example, if somebody is applying to Ivy League or equivalent colleges, where a large part of what we charge is going to go to the mentor itself. That's where we have a slightly larger revenue, average revenue per unit that we make from the student. In a lot of other categories where where the mentor is not going to be as expensive, or the mentor is going to be provided from the university itself, and we don't have to essentially do too much about it. There we make money only when the student gets to a university. and essentially the service is kind of completely free for the student. And we tell them that, hey, you give us these 10,000, 15,000 rupees once you get an admission. So different price sensitivity points that are built out in the entire process across multiple categories, so that we continue to be accessible for people across those multiple socio demographic
Yeah.
points as well.
Yeah. Okay. That's amazing. So, coming to the business aspect of Leverage EDU, so how do you, when you start a business, eventually it's like word of mouth and organic
Hmm.
sales, but how do you get those first few sales going when you've just like sort of launched?
Sure. So I think the first, I think this is a larger advice that I would love to give to people who are tuned in as well. I think it really helps if you are out there and if you're talking about what you're doing, and people really value that. People really kind of get some awareness thanks to that. So when I was kind of helping people out very randomly, doing 1:1 admissions help or doing 1:1 careers help, I was making case studies out of it and I was putting it out on social media, be it on a LinkedIn, Twitter, WeChat, wherever. Like, had I started the business today, I would have been on TikTok. But I was doing a bunch of those things which had more people come into our platform and say that, hey, this is something new that you're trying to do, and how can I essentially be a part of it? So that strategy was super useful, be in terms of hiring the first 5, 7, 10 people in the company, as well as kind of getting the first few customers. And from there, like you said, the word of mouth or the organic piece kind of kicks in.
Yeah.
And that
Yeah.
is a very key part of how we want to run the business as well. We don't go lavishly spending on marketing. We really believe that a large part of our business should come in from referrals, where one student is really happy and they refer us to another customer. So, yes.
Okay. So in the beginning, you go all out and just like talk about your business and put it out
I
on
told
sort
the
of all sort
LIC,
of platform.
the LIC insurance agent strategy, like I told you.
Yeah. Yeah. So, coming to funding, you've been able to get some like really good investors on board, and
Hmm.
you've also been sort of like on both sides of the fence. You've worked at a VC and you also raised funds for your own business. So, what do you think? How can you walk us through the process of getting funded, and what do you think is that one thing that really hits it off with like investors, and what do
Hmm.
they really look for, like a deal breaker of sorts?
Okay. So just a course correction first. I have not worked at a VC. I was a fellow at a program run by VC, the Draper piece.
Okay. Okay.
But I've
Okay.
largely been on the other side only. But yeah, okay. So I think when we raised the first round, it was largely individuals. I can talk about the journey. It helps if you have people in your network who really believe in you or have seen you work in some capacity. So I just moved shift from Baba job at that point of time. My first investor was the CFO of our job, who had seen me work in a very like close capacity and said, that, okay, this guy will at least ensure that he's working super hard and making sure the business doesn't close down in the first 6 months or the first 12 months. And then I had a bunch of these, like I told you, some alums, some professors. So I think it's very helpful if you build a network for yourself, and especially given the theme for today, we are talking about people who have worked for a few years and then they're getting into business. It helps a lot if you have spent time around people who have an opportunity to see you demonstrate those attributes which are very important to build and scale a business, both build and scale a business.
Yeah.
So I think that's what happened in my case. I had kind of more or less all my previous bosses kind of come in and put in a check. I had some of my friends come in and put in checks in the first round of the business. And then I think the more important part as it comes through, which relates to how you kind of get a VC to invest in your business. I think there it's largely a function of being very, very categorical about the problem that you're solving and why you are the best person to solve it. And I think that just cuts the ice. And of course, I think making sure you be very persistent with these folks and you don't kind of give up. For example, in my journey, I'd spoken to about 25 VCs, and in the end, we had 5 term sheets that came through. But those 5 term sheets came through after like when the first term sheet came through, that's when the other 4 flowed in. So I think that's what happens in VC sometimes. The first 1 or 2 people say yes, and then everybody says that, hey, yes, yes, yes. I was on the edge as well, and I want to make a decision too. And then you kind of get an option to choose people you want to work with. Our first backer was again so happy to kind of so that if it helps somebody who's tuned in. So, for example, we had a mentor called Vishal Gondal who runs a company called Goki, which is India's largest preventive healthcare company today. And I had Vishal connect me to the good folks at DSG Consumer Partners. And but had I not had the right angel investors in my first round, I wouldn't have been able to connect to the right VCs. And I think a lot of times people take any money that is on the table. And that is
Yeah.
my earnest request to all early stage entrepreneurs, that make sure who you're taking money from. It has to be useful. It will kind of define who you are and what you're doing in the future years as you kind of go out and raise more money. In the case of Bloom Ventures, had multiple connections with them, including one of my early investors working in their sister firms, Bloom being a part of the Draper network in some way at that point of time. And yet, I think Karthik Reddy, who's the partner and who I closely work with, I first met him in August 2018 at the sidelines of Prime Minister's Champions of Change that you spoke about in the beginning. And it took me a full September, October, November, December, January, June. So it took me about 9 months to set up a meeting with him. And that meeting was in a Starbucks. And then I realized that I had a 20-minute slot. And then I realized कि वो 20 मिनट का slot भी निकलता जा रहा है because he's in a meeting that is being previously overrun. In that meeting, like I always joke about it now, there was Anant, who's now who's now a very good friend. He runs a company called Milk Basket. And so Anant was kind of, तो मैंने realize किया मेरा तो time ही over हो गया, मतलब ये तो अनंत ही बैठे रहेगा यहाँ पे. And then Karthik said that, hey, you know what, like, should we reschedule it? It's like, where are you going next? He said, I'm going for this meeting in Vasant Kundan. Let me sit in a cab. That's fine. We'll have like 30 minutes to chat about. And I knew that like, those are 30 minutes I have after spending 9 months with waiting to get on a call with Karthik, because I really wanted to work with him, and I was really kind of I had seen how he supports founders like a Dunzo or other companies which I was a fan of when I was kind of on the edge. And those 30 minutes were, I think, we had a great chat, and we ended up kind of chatting for another 30 minutes after we reached the destination. And this was this was June 2000, 2 years back, 2018. And this was a heat storm blowing in. This is Saket, and we were kind of still continuing to have a chat. And he said, hey, you know what, like, I'll put money at the right time. And that's how things worked. So if I have to take out something from it in hindsight today, I think a little bit of persistence about people you want to work with, because it's not about just money, it's about the larger advice that they bring. And I realized that I would have been a lesser founder, or we would have been a lesser company if we hadn't taken money from Bloom and DSG as we did in our journey. So it's very important who you take money from at every single stage.
Yeah. Right. And then you have to part with your equity, and then you have to work with them in the future. So I think it's best to be.
Which is fine. I've always believed in that funda that you teach to class 8 students, that do you want to have 10% of huge pie, or do you want to have 100% of something which is like zilch? So,
Yeah,
and hence,
yeah,
you're right. And hence it's also important because you don't want to just get cash for that equity that you're parting away with. You want solid advice, and you want a partner who would stick with you and who would help you become a much better company as you move forward in your journey.
Yeah. So,
Yes.
actually, before I ask you my rest of the questions, I just want to take up the questions that have come in.
Sure.
Okay, this is again around your idea validation. How did you know when you had the right idea?
So, I think there are two kinds of entrepreneurs. One who look at the feasibility of a business and they kind of drop multiple ideas and then kind of start hacking them. Second kinds are those who really feel very, I won't use the word passionately, I think that's a overused word, obsessively about a certain cause or about a certain area that they really want to be, want to dedicate their life to. So I fall in the second category. I don't see myself doing any other business. I was doing a chat about 3 days back, similar chat. I was asked to comment on deep tech and some other pieces of the startup industry. I was like I know zilch about these. I only know about my business, and that's all I care about. I only know about what's happening in the higher education world, what a university is doing across the world, what university dean is saying, what is going to happen in 2023. I try and read anything and everything I can. but I'm kind of pretty much focused on my specialization and my industry. And I follow in the second bracket, and I believe that if you and of course those both kinds of people are successful in the longer run. I'm yet to discover whether this will work for me or not in 10 years from now. But I believe that this is again more fulfilling because you never feel as if you are working. You're always tuned in because this is something that you've wanted to do all your life, and
Yeah.
you are essentially in some way getting paid for your own learning, your own growth, and living your passion. So I think there's nothing more better than and more beautiful than that.
Yeah, yeah. And coming to my next question, right now it's obviously like these very difficult times that we're all living in,
Hmm.
completely like unprecedented and new. So, how
Hmm.
are you navigating through COVID? And how are you, do you plan to tailor your services post COVID,
Hmm.
considering, price point, like in terms of your price points, because, like spending ability might change, and how are you navigating through this?
Sure. Sure. So what I think there's a quote that I read somewhere, not my original quote, but you can get ahead of the car in front only when it's raining. So, and right now it's pouring, like it's pouring bad.
Yeah.
So I think we have seen this as an opportunity to be largely in the Indian landscape. We compete with brick and mortar companies who have a very different style of doing business as compared to ours. So in fact, we have seen this as an opportunity to kind of go out and scale much more faster, do more things for students, be more student friendly. We have, ever since the lockdown started, we have done 35 sessions like these that my team of counselors, my team of head coaches, some of our mentors kind of volunteer to kind of do for the benefit of students. We've been kind of putting out a lot of other free resources. That those are the larger pieces in which we are saying we are trying to speak to more universities and so on and so forth. So that's a larger theme of trying to look at the situation. What we've done more specifically is that we have tried to launch completely new products which will change the whole industry during these times. For example, in the first week of April, we launched something called UniConnect that I spoke about. We realized that students can't go out now and speak to universities as they would when universities would come and do these fairs. Universities can't come out to South Asia or other parts of the world right now to speak to students right away. So we built out this online education fair platform where universities from around the world can kind of come in, get a booth for themselves, and students can join that booth, get on the spot offers, get information about scholarships and financial aid, and so much more. Then we started focusing more on our live learning platform called Leverage Live, where people are learning not just test prep driven courses like an IELTS or a TOEFL or a SAT, but they're also we are focusing on helping them learn some micro skills which will be very useful for them in the longer run. On Leverage Live, we also launched a marketplace that helps all of our partner universities launch small courses, 3 month, 6 month, 12-month courses. That is something that we're working on today. Uh, and give access to students at a much fairer price point, which will help them move to the next level. So as universities get unbundled in the next decade, and there's something that we spoke about a couple of minutes before, the credential part, the networking part, the academic part, all of those pieces are going to look much different. There are going to be enough people who want to look at the wholeness of it as well, who still want to go to a university and enjoy the entire experience. There are going to be some people who say that, yeah, I don't only want to focus on the academics piece of it. It's going to be different from MOOCs. It's not going to be a Zoom class for sure. Online education has to be built ground up. It can't be just moving the university
Yeah.
version to a Zoom class. But it's going to look and feel different. It's going to be far more useful for people who essentially don't want the whole experience. And then there are going to be some people who want to focus on the credentials piece, which really helps them kind of move forward. And these people could look at these 3 month, 4 month programs. For example, ISB does a bunch of these programs and certificate in say this much, certificate in this, and that helps them kind of put the ISB tag on their shoulders in some way. So as that happens, I think higher education will only kind of the overall impact will only kind of expand, and access will widen. And we see ourselves as a company which, in some way, if I have to use very easy word to describe us, we are a distributor of this access. We are a distributor of higher ed. So when a part of it moves online, we are very happy because it helps us kind of expand that access much quicker and it aligns with our vision. So that's what we're doing right now. We are trying to not just try to innovate at our end and make problems easier in the way we look at it, but also speak to universities from around the world. We are launching a remote readiness survey about in 2 weeks from now, and figuring out how remote ready are universities for the future. And we're doing a lot of things with universities that will also help them brace this impact and move them online as much as possible. So as a three-way marketplace between students, mentors, and universities, we believe that we have a duty towards all three stakeholders, and that's what we're focused upon. You'll see a lot more coming from our stables in the next 6 to 8 months.
Yeah, amazing. And I actually read about the education fair that you hosted on your the online education fair that you
Correct.
hosted. I found that so like interesting because like COVID or no COVID, I think that is so helpful because
Correct.
even while I was working in Bombay and my friend who was working at as an equity research
Hmm.
analyst,
Hmm.
when you're trying to apply to an MBA, then there's that season where all colleges are coming down for your
Correct.
to see them, and it's such an effort to squeeze in the time after work or take some break from work to go and be there at those events. So that's such a helpful way to just get across to
No,
everyone,
thank you.
like irrespective of the COVID situation.
No, thank you. No, that's what the larger student population says. Sitting at the comfort of their house, in their room, they can log on and speak to a university face to face and even get offers. Same thing with the universities as well, because universities are really worried about how they will
Yeah,
speak to students now. And thanks to this, we are getting a chance to get ahead of the car in front, like I said, while it's pouring.
yeah, yeah. So there's a question from Akshay. So what
Okay.
are some futuristic innovations you expect in the education system in the near future
So again, so let
in
me
India?
Sure. So let me speak more specifically about what I just answered. I believe that universities are going to get unbundled. There are different pieces to it. And it's going to be very important that the higher education ecosystem aligns itself with this future. We don't just go about adding more, say, certifications that somebody needs to start a university. If tomorrow Akshay, who asked a question and not this Akshay, wants to go out and start a skilling academy which is focused on one particular course, they should be able to do it. I see, we have seen coding academies, right? But coding academies are just like one part of it. There could be 99 other options, something for construction workers, something for nursing, something for like the sports guys I told you about, something for the nutrition guys, something for the culinary guys, something for the food tech guys. So I think specialized, I won't say specialized degrees, but special degrees were always a vague way to look at it. But the specialized programs are gonna kind of make the whole theme much more comprehensive for the future generations. They could look at if I already have access to the right career advice thanks to platforms like Leverage Edu, and if I already know what I want to do, why do I want to do a generic degree? Why do I want to do an MBA? Why do I want to at the risk of upsetting my alma mater, like why do I want to go to an ISB? Why
Yeah,
do I not do something more specific, which is more in line with what I really want to do because I've already discovered it? And like I told you, like we've been very focused on building that reputation for ourselves at Leverage Edu in the last 2 to 3 years. And if something like that picks up further, like we'll be very excited to kind of work in tandem with this change. And that is something that we are hoping for as well. And that is something that we are working towards as well. And we already are working with more specific schools that focus on some of these specific programs, nursing being one of them, construction being one of them, sports being one of them, luxury fashion management being one of them, where people can kind of come in and work with big boutiques, so on and so forth. So I think that's the future. Skills into education, into employability, and employability will always be the most important piece because the larger proportion
yeah,
of our country is lower to middle class, and
yeah.
that's where we need to get to.
Yeah, yeah. And actually, could you talk to us about, a particular challenge that you faced in this journey, or like just a general mindset to sort of walk through challenges, and how do you sustain this entrepreneurial journey that can be rather like daunting and lonely sometimes?
Sure. So I think challenges. it's very difficult to talk about particular challenges. Every day is a challenge. And I'm not kidding. I'm not saying it for the sake of it. Every day is a challenge in some way or the other. It's not easy to build a business in India for sure. You get to face things that you don't plan for. Uh, what's the right? I'm trying to find the right English substitute to it. This is a very desi word that I have for it. But let me.
We'd be
There's
more
some
than happy
guda.
to hear that.
There's some guda that you need, right?
Sorry.
Like there's some guts that you essentially want. It's a very UP word. My family hails from UP. So
I'm
there's a
actually
lot
from
of
Kanpur.
oh beautiful, oh beautiful, and I give the Kanpur example as well. So there's some guda slash guts that you need to essentially be able to go through a bunch of those things, and there is a way there's a process in which you can kind of go out and hack it, and there is also you can put yourself into delusion to make sure you go through phases like these. So I do both. First is I think uh, I have designed the company in such a way that I get to work with people who I really like and love, and I think uh, and that really helps. I have Aman, who I've been like working with for the last decade, who leads tech. We've recently had Digvijay, who was investment from ISB, join us as chief operating officer, who was with McKinsey for the last 5 years, who was in investing before that. And I have Gaurav, who I've known for a long time, and I have like a lot of people who are either my college juniors or people who have known, who have kind of really liked, and it's largely a very fun vibe at our workplace. And even when we are like in the Zoom era, we still have a lot of fun, and we have calls that go until 5 a.m. and 6 a.m. So one part is that we have consciously kept the culture very uh, fun driven. It's very important to have fun in life, and it's very understated when you're trying to build something hard. Second is the delusion piece. So I listen to a lot of Punjabi songs. I think that helps me, even though I'm not a Punjabi myself. If you will see a lot of these rap artists and their lyrics, whenever I think you are in a low and you listen to these lyrics, you feel like, oh, like this person was having the same journey that I am having right now, and it kind of helps you relate. So I'm a big Badsha fan. So back in the day when we were still a much smaller company, I would plug into the Badsha playlist every single day, and I needed to hear that album once in every 24 hours. And now, of course, that's moved to having some of the other song playing on my YouTube playlists all the time. And I think that kind of in a delusional way, kind of keeps you away from thinking too much about the stresses that come from the everyday.
Yeah.
I see somebody comment Kanpur rocks. Awesome.
Yeah. Yeah. So coming to my next question, besides, so basically, music helps you sail through work.
Hmm.
My
Hmm.
take from that.
Uh,
And coming
yeah.
to my next question, could you recommend like 3 books or podcasts that you would really recommend to someone who's starting out and that you think have helped you?
Sure. So I think for all startups, one absolutely recommended book always is Shoe Dog, which
Yeah.
is the story of Nike, the founder of Nike, and it's Phil Knight. And like I'm a huge Phil Knight fan. The way in which he built out the business by going through as many downs as possible across a very large period of time, and I think I'm a huge fan of that. So I think Shoe Dog is a big recommendation. And other than that, I think. There's this book called The Hard Thing About Hard Things by Ben Horowitz. I think I'm calling it right. Which again talks about the journey and goes into more specifics. So I think those will be my 2 book recommendations, which somebody should get started with. And on the podcast piece, I listen to, I think for beginners, the best podcast to kind of get started with is Masters of Scale. And I listened to a podcast called The Origins, which is about how the finance ecosystem largely works, how the LPs and VCs work together, and that gives you a lot of understanding about how money is really playing out, how a lot of VCs who are also raising capital from LPs, it all goes down towards having social impact. And as a founder or as an entrepreneur, or as a startup executive, if you can essentially also align your vision towards doing more impact-driven work in your life, I think that's how we all come together and make the world a much better place. So I think the startup ecosystem owes it to the world to solve problems which are very relevant, very futuristic, and are helping somebody up-level their life and transform their life, which is what our vision is at Leverage It.
Yeah, amazing. Interestingly, I've very recently forayed into like non-fiction from fiction, and Shoe Dog was one of the first like non-fiction books that I
Awesome,
read.
awesome.
Really liked it.
Have you finished it?
So, yeah, I finished it. It's been a while. This is like right when I was going to quit my job. So,
Okay, beautiful. Another book which I recommended to my team last night was this book called Saying No to Jugaad. It's written by T.N. Hari. It's a big basket story, which is again a fabulous story coming out of India. You must take a look at that. Yeah.
that up next, probably. Okay. Coming to my next question, where do you see Leverage EDU in 5 years?
Oh wow, very interesting question. I generally don't even answer this question for the investors, but we see ourselves. Let me kind of to put it very broadly. We see ourselves on the sides of the student. The world is changing very quickly. Like I told you in the previous part of this chat, universities are getting unbundled. We are seeing people focus on different attributes of this unbundled university: the credential piece, the network piece, the academic piece. We see ourselves aligning to all of those pieces and focusing more on things that really help the student become employable and be able to kind of transform their life from X to Y in the larger horizon. So categorically, what we don't do from day zero is we don't get students to do degrees which will not add a lot of value in terms of their employability unless it's like a huge passion project for them and that's what they really want to do. So it's employability has been a very big focus for us always, and we see ourselves kind of focusing more on it, especially in the age of online universities that we're going to see as we move forward. I told you about Leverage Live, I told you about UniConnect. We have universities coming to UniConnect now who are only focused on online courses, and that is absolutely brilliant. Some of these are from India as well, and yeah, I think that's pretty much it. Being by the side of the student, being a company which is focusing on employability, and being a company which is helping people get access to skills which are necessary to be able to get to the next level of their life.
Okay. And if you were to look back at your entrepreneurial journey, is there any one thing you wish you had done differently?
One thing which I had done differently, no, that's a tough one. Uh, mm, mm, mm. I don't think so. I'm pretty much I'm a Bollywood fan as well, other than being an entrepreneur. So I'm pretty much I love to look at this as a 3.5 year movie, or which is still in motion, and I would not want to live it any other way. We have had a fair share of learnings, and every single learning, every single hard time that we have gone through has only taught us how to do something more differently and more beautifully, be it in terms of solving a particular challenge through the intervention of technology, be it improving our processes, be it doing more and more things on the side of the student. A lot of things that we do today are stuff that is coughed off by the industry in general. We continue to invest a large proportion of our resources towards building free tools, towards building free chats, towards giving a free counseling to every single person who comes onto our platform. A lot of people think that is wastage of money. A lot of people think that giving so much resources at the hands of the student is not the right way, and you should essentially make sure that they come to your door once, and then you essentially arm them. That's a strategy that is followed by a lot of larger edtech companies as well. But I have a different take towards it. I think we are in it for a much larger cause, and time will be the right answer to what's the right strategy, whether it is to play by the student or whether it is essentially to monetize a student on day zero.
Yeah. And if you were to leave us with one like golden piece of advice to people who are starting out or who want to venture into entrepreneurship, what would that be?
Sure. So I think one of my favorite and most underrated advice that I've got it from somebody and I've sworn by it ever since is it's not done till it's done. And that is true for every single thing that you do in your life. It's not done till it's done in terms of acquiring a customer, till an investor conversation that you're having, till a sale is being made, to a new feature that is being launched, which can just kind of break out in the last particular second. You've seen that happen with SpaceX last night. And I think, of course, you prepare for the very best possible, and you hope that everything will function beautifully. But I love the energy that being a little stressful gives you. I, in fact, don't understand the concept of not being stressful around something. If I'm not stressful around something, I'll be really worried. There has to be the right amount of tension. You can't panic for sure, because I think that will throw things off.
Yeah.
But the right amount of stress is very important to make sure that things go through and it goes to the other side of being done. And I think as soon as you kind of check mark that done, if you are kind of trying to build something which is much larger than yourself, you don't get any chance to kind of say yippee or raise your hand or anything like that. You essentially start you kind of put your attention towards the next big thing that is happening. And I think that's the beauty of trying to build something, and that's what we're trying to do as well.
Amazing. So, thank you so much for joining us,
No,
Akshay.
thanks, Sushla.
And you know, because I also personally feel like I wish I had someone like that when I was starting out. It's so helpful to have a mentor who can, like, walk you through your professional
Correct.
life. So you're doing some incredible work, and really, like,
Thank
good
you.
luck on. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks. Really appreciate.